Welcome to Q&A, Social Security Disability Today. This program is brought to you by the Reeves Law Firm, representing you and your Social Security and disability needs. If you have a problem or questions regarding Social Security and disability, call attorney Anthony Reeves. Here's your host, attorney Anthony Reeves.
What should you do when you receive the CD from the hearing office? Okay, let me tell you what's typically going to happen. You're going to walk into the hearing office. You're going to sign in. You're going to tell them that you're there. And they're going to ask you, do you have a representative? You'll tell them no, if you don't have one. This is assuming you don't have one. And they're going to hand you a CD. That's right. And you're going to add a compact disc. And you're probably looking at this like, what in the hell is this thing here? All right. The disc is your exhibit file. That's everything that Social Security, and more importantly, everything that the judge is going to rely upon to make a determination of whether you're disabled. Now, most of the times it's encrypted. So the first thing you need to ask when you get that bad boy is, how do I open this sucker up? They'll tell you. It's no big deal. Once you open it up, you're probably going to look at this thing, and it's going to be in a weird format. It's going to have documents, and it's going to have an index, and you're going to ask yourself, okay, what the hell am I doing with this thing? Well, there's a couple. It's going to be broken down into 5 sections: A, B, D, E, F. Okay. Typically, A is the decisions that have occurred. B is all the appeals that have been done on your behalf, and so forth. That's usually where you find the B section. Notice of representation forms, hearing notice announcements, your announcement forms are there. D has to deal with your actual application as well as your earnings. E is usually your miscellaneous development information. This is usually if there's any educational paperwork, any field office notes, appointment dates, things of that nature. And then F is the medical section. So then you look through this and you say, what do I need to look for? Well, A is basically your denials. So that can or cannot be helpful to you depending on what's there. Okay. B is usually is where all your appeals are, your request for reconsideration, your request for a hearing, your hearing notices, those things. D is going to be very important for you because D, depending on how you've worked, your earnings report should be in there. And why is that section important to you? Well, let's say that you said you became disabled in January of 2013. Well, you want to look on your earnings because your earnings will demonstrate if there's monies that are appearing there after that date. It's also important for purposes of calculating your insurance coverage, but that's, again, Social Security does that for you in advance. But that document can be very helpful to you because it usually gives a breakdown of the jobs, the work that you've done, usually in terms of monies and employers that you've been with. It tells you the year, how much money, who the employer was. And it has new hire information is usually in there, meaning if you've gotten a job recently, unemployment information is in there. So if you've received unemployment, it's in there as well. Why is that important? Because you want to be aware of what the dollar amounts are. So just in case you get asked the question, what money this is here, you're not surprised. E is the miscellaneous development section. That's helpful to you because in addition to information about appointments and resumes for I believe the resumes for the experts, I think it's in the B section, but I think it might be sometimes it's in the E. It's good for your purposes because you have third-party forms there. Now you say, what are the third-party forms? Third-party forms are typically the forms that are filled out by people who may know you on your behalf. So those forms are good to look at because you can literally see what they've said about what they've observed of your condition. It's also good for a refresher to you to let you know what forms you sent so that if the court asks you about certain things, you already know it's there. The F section is your medical records. Now, for those of you who don't realize this, a little friendly tip. If you filed a request for hearing up to the point when you apply. When you apply up to the point where you file a request for hearing, Social Security is responsible for getting your medical records. At the time you request a hearing, typically Social Security stops getting those records. You're on your own. Why is that important? Well, guess what? If you file a request for a hearing, most jurisdictions, you're probably looking at anywhere from 10 to 11 months up to a year and a half, almost 2 years to a hearing. If you haven't been sending records to Social Security about your medical condition, guess what? They're not going to be on that CD, and the judge is not going to have that as well. So you want to look in there because you want to see what records did the court have before them, because this way you can tell them if they ask you, is there anything outstanding? A lot of times what happens is that people think that just because they apply for request for hearing that they're done and that the court will get those records for them. No, sirree, Bob. You got to get those things because you have the burden of proving that you're disabled. Now, what usually throws a lot of people off is they're like, wow, why am I just looking at this now? Social Security is electronic. A lot of times you're not going to get that CD until you get there unless you ask for it in advance, which I always tell people is a more prudent course of action so that you can know exactly what Social Security has. So if you get that CD, you'll know what you need to make sure you're prepared for, and you'll also be familiar with what's on that CD. Also, that CD is helpful to you because in the event you decide to go look for a representative and they want to know about your case, you have a CD that you can provide to them to review to determine whether or not your medical records or your file is strong enough for them to represent you. The CD is the file that Social Security is going to rely on when they're determining whether you're disabled or not. You want to make sure that everything you need is on that CD.